I was going to say. I was going to say that if you are in distress while you're doing the program, then take advantage of the telephone hotline. We have several people that are very experienced at pretty much everything that happens to people when they do this. And they, I mean, they're probably kicking me for encouraging more people to call because they are extremely busy. But if you have, something going on, don't sit there and, handle it yourself necessarily. If you need some help, give a call. Now, I have talked to several people in this group this week who have confessed to me that when they need help, they never ask for it. I would like to suggest that you change that way of dealing with the world and ask for help. You may have grown up in an environment where when you asked for help, you got shot down in some way, and the help wasn't available, and it was a very negative experience to ask for help. But you can ask us for help. We are there to help, we want to help, and we know how to help. And it would be a growthful experience for someone who has trouble asking for help just to ask for help. And this is coming from someone who always has had trouble asking for help. My middle name was I don't need anything. And most of the people that are going around saying I don't need anything need a lot. And there's a few of you in this room, and unfortunately you probably don't all know who you are. But so this is really where the rubber meets the road. If you're going to grow and evolve, then you are going to go through these periods of chaos. This is how growth works. There's no growth without going through this chaos. Now, that doesn't mean there's no growth without suffering and strain, because if you can meet the chaos with no resistance, it doesn't hurt. It's only the resistance that causes it to hurt. So learn when you're going into chaos. Know what your particular favorite strategy of dealing with it is. And when you start to feel the chaos and see yourself starting to go into that, step back and watch. This is why people for 25 years have been telling everybody, feel your feelings and so on. It's because when you step back and just feel it, that's when that shift happens. So any questions about this, this whole process of how to deal with what's going on? Yes?
Why is it some people report after using the tapes all their bad habits fall away, and then there's others like myself who are in full possession of every bad habit and have added a couple new ones?
Give me a couple of examples of bad habits.
Well, one that I've added is fairly frequent is cursing. I never used to curse, and now, after using these wonderful tapes, I'm the envy of most of my male friends.
And curse like a sailor, huh?
What's wrong with that? Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Well, obviously that's a way, that's a way of blowing off energy,
but
right?
But others say, this bad habit felt like overeating. That hasn't gone away yet. I mean, I still tend to.
Isn't that a coping mechanism? Isn't that a coping mechanism? Most all of these so-called dysfunctional feelings and behaviors are attempts to cope with being in the chaos. You go into the chaos and it feels uncomfortable, so you eat. Because, the eating changes your state. And it helps you to deal with the fact that you feel like you're in chaos. So a lot of times people will be pushed very hard by the holosync, and so they're in that chaos state a lot, and so they really start pulling out all these behaviors that they've learned on how to deal with it. Now this is exactly what I'm saying. If you say, instead of eating, because I feel a little edgy here and I feel like eating, instead I'm going to sit down in a chair, close my eyes, and I'm going to feel whatever the feelings are that are going on in my body. And I'm just going to sit here and be really curious about what's going on. And that allows that shift to happen. The reason that I ask people to learn this focusing technique that Gendlin at the University of Chicago teaches is because essentially that's what he's telling people to do. I think he makes it way too complicated. He has all these 7 steps that you go through and everything, and I used to teach it in workshops, and I found that even when someone guided them through each of the steps at the end, most people did it wrong because the steps were so complicated. And I kind of boil down what he teaches into just what I said. You know, you're feeling something, and focusing is a way of dealing with uncomfortable feelings, essentially. And so you're having this uncomfortable feeling, you get curious about it, you sit down, you notice what happens, and you just put your attention on what happened. And then you let whatever happens be okay. And what happens, he calls a felt shift. But really what it is it's a reorganization at a higher level. When the felt shift happens, the system is reorganizing. And by the way, at some point, they took people that were doing this focusing technique, and right at the instant that they had the felt shift, their brain made bursts of theta waves. Very interesting, huh? So there is a correlation between, getting into these slower brainwave patterns and having these felt shifts. So yes, people will exhibit increased amounts of these different coping behaviors, the ones that are trying to push the energy out, hold it off from coming in, or distract themselves. The people that tend to do that more are the people who have adopted resistance as a mode of dealing with the world. Now, I'll raise my hand and say I was the world champion of resistors. My whole life was about resistance. I was a rebel on every level, and I still am on some levels, but my whole way of dealing with the world was to resist. So I made going through this really uncomfortable for myself. Really uncomfortable. Other people are more kind of go with the flow and let it happen kind of people. Now they have other problems. They have their own set of problems, but at least they are more likely to be the kind of person that you mentioned that said, well, my bad habits have fallen away and that sort of thing, because they're not so much into using resistance as a strategy for dealing with life. So, yeah, Roy.
Isn't there a paradox that you should be self-sufficient, you're the creator, you should be able to cope and come up with the answer and be independent, and then you're offering that you need to seek help, so to speak. Is that something in our culture that says, well, you're responsible, you need to be tough, and you've got the answer within you, all you need to do is to dig deep?
Yeah, I think that is a paradox in our culture.
No, always seek out the help where it is, and it'll take you over that.
Well, that whole way of thinking is a real dualistic way of thinking. It assumes that you're separate. And so if you're separate, the whole idea of, well, do I rely on myself or do I rely on something outside of me? In reality, there is no outside of you, because we create this map of reality where it feels like we're separate and it feels like everything else is outside of us, but that doesn't make it true. So in a way, that whole paradox exists because people are looking at things through dualistic glasses.
What about your hotline concept? Is it appealing to our dualistic nature? Are you sort of...
With the hotline, we're just trying to ease people's suffering, so that if someone is You know, people make all these assumptions about growth and about the program and a number of other things. And a lot of them are around all the shoulds that they have. I should do this every day. We've had people that it was way too much for them to do this every day. And they were freaking out constantly. But they were going to do it right. And so they had to do it every day. And they were just killing themselves by pushing that hard. And so they needed to call up and have somebody say, hey, you know, ease off. It's okay. Don't be in such a hurry. This is going to help you. And it's going to help you plenty fast. But you don't need to kill yourself to do it. And yeah, sure, that's operating within a dualistic framework. It is, yeah. Yeah, Alan?
Just on your